All right, sorry, when I shared it, moved my mute button. So hopefully you can hear me now and see my screen.
Yes,
Let
we
me
can
go into
hear you, and
presentation.
yeah, we can see it's showing us. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Okay, okay, great. Gosh, a few years of these meetings and I still have technical difficulties, so sorry about that.
It's all good.
Uh, Good afternoon, Chair Marcano and members of the TAPS committee. My name is Carly Campuzano and I'm the traffic manager within the Public Works Department. And this first item is for an intergovernmental agreement with E470 and the City of Aurora for temporary traffic signals at the Jewel Avenue interchange. This just shows a picture of the existing interchange. So the existing interchange at Jewel and E470 is currently stop controlled on the off ramps. And so city staff have been working with E470 on this interchange. We actually conducted a signal warrant study back in 2019 that showed that these two intersections currently meet criteria to be signalized. So based on that and based on some pretty high traffic volumes we've seen from these ramps, we've worked with E470 to prioritize the signalization of these two locations. So this IGA is really for the agreement with E470 for both the design and the construction. So this is actually very similar to how we handled the E470 and Gartrell interchange, and we brought an IGA for that one that's very similar to council last year. So the plan is for E470 to fund the full amount of construction, which right now we're estimating to be $1.4 million for these two signals. And the design will be done by the city using our internal staff resources. So no money from the city, but we are going to be using our internal staff to do the designs for these. And the reason that this one is going to be a temporary signal with span wire instead of a full signal is because the bridge is ultimately planned to be widened. The widening is not planned for as quickly as the Gartrell project. I think the widening's planned for probably mid 2030s in 470's master plan. So this is temporary, but still longer than 10 years temporary. So it's planned to be a span wire signal control.
Okay.
Yep. So just the general schedule for this, we're working on the design. Right now, we already got some survey and we're going to process that and start our design work in 2023. Our plan is to put the project out to bid by the end of this year and then to start construction in probably spring of 2024. Construction will probably last about a year total is our estimate. So we'll try to get it done by the end of 2024, but likely it'll go into 2025. So a question for the committee is, do you support moving this IGA between the City of Aurora and E470 regarding Jewel Avenue temporary signal installations for design and construction to study session?
All right. Thank you for that presentation, Carly. So I do have a question, a couple actually. So first, I understand that this is a temporary solution, right? Just because the use is increased. The stop sign is no longer adequate to manage that intersection. The cost is pretty steep for the for the signals here. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity now to make changes that would benefit us into the future. And I bet you know where I'm going to go with this.
Roundabouts. Okay, sorry,
Yes.
didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Yeah, so I'm looking right now on my other monitor here, the intersection of the Keystone Parkway and 126th Avenue in Carmel, Indiana. I believe Keystone is comparable, if not higher in volume in terms of total traffic flow than E470 is at this point. But the configuration that they put together there is overall likely cheaper than signalized intersections and has less collision points, so it would also be safer as well. So I'm wondering, is that something that we have considered in this process so far, especially if my understanding, if I'm reading the backup correctly, we're the ones responsible for design and E470 is going to be paying. So
yeah, so that's a good question. So for these, the bridge right now is pretty narrow, and in my opinion, I haven't seen a roundabout project on a freeway completed in a retrofit without doing some significant grading and bridge replacement and widening. So this is really meant to be the most cost-effective way we could improve operations for the near term. I think as the project goes into actual design for the widening and that level of evaluation, that could be something we discuss with E470.
Yeah.
But I also know that they do have a master plan that they published, I believe, in 2020. And I'm not sure if these types of things were already evaluated through that process with long-term traffic, but they do have kind of a master plan that shows all their proposed interchanges, and it could be something that they've already looked at and selected interchange alternatives. But knowing that the final design for the bridge widening is pretty far out, I think it's something we can definitely reevaluate and bring up and see if that would be a better ultimate solution. But I just don't think that that would be within their current kind of short-term fixed budget, just because it's so much widening to get those roundabouts in, especially with an interchange when you're accommodating trucks. They're pretty big footprints, so yeah.
So I definitely get that, for right now, that's probably not realistic, but since you did mention the bridge widening, I would just be remiss if I did not continue to advocate for these kinds of improvements. So yeah, and is that something we'd be able to talk to the E470 authority about, and CDOT and whoever else needs to be involved there, just to ensure that that's actually if it has not already been considered, that it be considered?
Yeah, we do have monthly coordination meetings with E470 staff, so we can definitely bring it up and kind of see where they're already at with the interchange evaluations, and if we could look at other options moving forward. I think that's something we can discuss with them at a staff level.
All right, great. I would appreciate that. Thank you. Yep. Councilmember Lawson, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I have no questions, but I will support this moving forward.
Same. All right. So with that, it will move forward. Thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on, we have 4B, 20 is plenty. And who's going to be presenting on that? Oh, looks like Carly, you're up again.
It's me again.
All right.
Thank you. At least I don't have to turn my mic on and off for this, so I'm good. Thank you again. My name is Carly Campizano. I'm the traffic manager in the Public Works Department, and this presentation is about the 20 is Plenty initiative. And this presentation is meant to be an informational item, kind of with some initial information, which was requested at the previous TAPS meeting, I believe in November. So first of all, I'll just go through kind of the plan for this, this presentation and what I'm going to go over. So I'll start off with some background information on the 20 is Plenty initiative. Then I'll go over some different comparisons to peer cities, both within Colorado and then across the United States, as well as a literature review of best practices in the country. After that, I'll go over the fiscal impact in Aurora, then key takeaways, and then next steps for Aurora. So that is the agenda for this item. So first of all, just what is 20 is Plenty? 20 is Plenty is the kind of term given to an initiative which has taken place really across the United States, but also in other countries, to advocate for lowering posted speed limits on local roadways generally from 25 to 20, and with the ultimate goal to improve safety, reduce crash severity, and really improve the livability on these local streets. So the default speed limit on local streets in Aurora and in most other municipalities is 25 miles an hour. This is reflected in our city code section stated on this slide for residential roadways. First, just looking at peer cities and what others have done. We have reached out to Boulder, Colorado, as well as Denver, Colorado, which are two other agencies who have recently adopted the 20 mile an hour speed limit through 20 is Plenty on residential roadways. This was adopted in Boulder in 2020, and they actually implemented it in 2020, maybe the end of 2020 or 2021. This was also very recently adopted by Denver, but they have not yet implemented the 20 miles an hour on local streets yet. So these pictures just show some of the signs and the types of signs that were implemented in Boulder. So those are the two data points within Colorado. And then we also looked across the country and just wanted to say thank you to our friends at Boulder and Denver. They provided a lot of great information when I reached out to them. So I know they're not listening right now, probably, but big thanks to them. They've been great partners in this. So a lot of this literature review and review of other agencies was done pretty thoroughly by Denver and Boulder. They both reached out to other agencies and did different levels of outreach and before they adopted their programs. So some of the other agencies across the United States who have implemented this recently are Portland, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And these were implemented from 2018 to 2020, so pretty recently as well. And then out of all those agencies that have implemented 20 miles an hour on local streets, a couple of them, being Boulder, Colorado, and Portland, Oregon, did very extensive before-after studies where they collected data before the speed limits were switched out and then after the speed limits were switched out. Both of these agencies collected a lot of different data and have a lot of data points, which really indicates that their data is pretty robust and that their results are enough to be statistically significant from a data perspective. So a couple of terms that I just wanted to go over really quick on these tables. The 50th percentile speed means the speed at which 50% of vehicles are traveling at or below. 85th percentile speed is a speed that the traffic engineering folks normally used to mean prevailing speeds, or the speeds at which 85% of people are traveling at or below. So just wanted to let you know those terms. I'll probably use them a little more throughout this. But really the key takeaways from both Boulder and Portland are that even after they changed the speed limit signs, there really were no impacts on the actual traveled speeds based on that change alone. So that's the key findings of both of those studies. And next, just wanted to go over kind of this review of literature. So these documents are kind of federally accepted guidance on how to set speed limits, and also kind of some speed management practices and best practices for slowing traffic down. And so these manuals really indicate that it's more of the physical built environment that impacts vehicle speeds rather than just switching out the posted speed limit signs, which a bunch of agencies have seen reflected in that data that switching the signs alone really is not very impactful for actual speeds. So just wanted to go over some examples of the built environment and what Boulder has found. And then on the next slide, I'll go over what we found in Aurora as well. We actually have collected pretty extensive speed data within the city of Aurora through our residential traffic calming program. So we do have a lot of different data points with different road sections as well. But in Boulder, these summarize some of their findings. So again, we have that 85th percentile or the prevailing speed. So one interesting thing on this graphic, they show the before-after speed, and on these roads, the after speed of after they turned to 20 miles an hour actually increased a little bit. Probably not enough to be statistically significant, but something interesting to note. But the main takeaway is really that on this street on the left, that's only 27 feet wide, the prevailing speed is about 20 miles an hour. The street on the right, that's about 40 feet wide, this prevailing speeds are closer to 29 miles an hour. So that just kind of builds the case that it's really the physical environment, and drivers will go the speed that they feel comfortable going, and that's really dictated by some of the, the design of the road. So here are some local examples, and this is data that we've collected recently at the city. So I just selected 3 different streets that had different widths. So we have a 35-foot width street on Kenton, which really reflects what our local, pretty much what our local street section is in a lot of places in the city. And Kenton Street is also a street where we received a recent traffic calming application, I believe from a resident who asked about the 20 is Plenty program. So that's Kenton Street, so 35 feet wide, prevailing speeds are about 27, posted at 25, so that's really within the range of what we would expect on this type of street. Next we have 13th Avenue. 13th is a little bit different because it is parallel to Colfax, so definitely get some heavier volumes of traffic as well, and people may be using it who don't directly live off of it. But that street is 40 feet wide and the prevailing speeds are about 33. And then we have a collector street section, which is also a pretty common section that we see in a lot of places in Aurora. This example is Uvalde Street, but it has 2 through lanes, it has striped bike lanes, and then on-street parking. And so 50 feet wide total, and the prevailing speeds are 35. And at least in Aurora, I think from our traffic calming program, what we hear the most about are a lot of times these collector sections, just because they're wider. But they're also wider because we're providing the multimodal facilities and for at least a lot of our streets. But even striping the bike lanes, though, generally doesn't make the lanes feel narrower enough for people to drive very much slower. So those are the Aurora examples. Next, I wanted to go over the fiscal impact. So we pulled some of these numbers together just using recent numbers from contractors of what it costs to switch out signs. The main fiscal impact for adopting 20 is plenty in Aurora would be really switching out all of our existing speed limit signs. We tried to put together an estimate of how many signs we think we have, and it's a little over 3,000 existing signs that we would need to switch out, which would need to be done by a contractor. And then we'd probably add new signs as well to increase the density. And that's something that Boulder and Denver both looked at as well. Just because on some streets we might have, especially in older neighborhoods, we might have more inconsistent street posting. And then education and marketing, that's a big part of the 20 is Plenty program. And it's something that you know, if we were going to roll out such a thing, we would want to provide that so that the residents know why we're doing the program, what the goals are and all that. So that's additional cost as well. So the total cost, if we were to do this type of thing, would probably be around 1.6 million citywide. So just wanted to wrap up with the next couple of slides. First, it's the key takeaways. So one takeaway is in the cities where 20 is Plenty was adopted and speed limits were decreased, the before-after studies show that the speeds largely remained unchanged. Also, the data and the literature shows that the street layout has the biggest impact on vehicle speeds rather than just switching out the signs. And then I didn't touch specifically on this in the presentation, but one other thing to note is that, you know, the program goals for 20 is Plenty is to reduce severe crashes, but severe crashes are really not happening on our local streets. They're happening on our arterials and our higher volume, higher speed roadways like that. So that's the takeaways. So next, I just wanted to go over some proposed next steps for the committee to review and provide feedback on. So we wanted to provide this initial presentation to give kind of a higher level overview of what 20 is Plenty is and best practices and other agencies and what they've done in their findings. But our proposed next steps are for staff to bring additional information and kind of get more into the weeds really in a future TAPS meeting. So the future presentation could include, I think, first of all, more detail on a proposed speed reduction study. Denver and Boulder, Denver specifically more recently did a pretty elaborate study that includes considerations for different types of streets. So not just residential streets, but also, you know, business districts, special areas, commercial areas, you know, all different types of streets. We could look at recommended updates to the city's traffic calming toolbox, which is something we developed about 4 years ago and probably could use some updating and could be a way to maybe incorporate some of the built environment types of changes. We could look at options for a pilot project, which could include repurposing travel lanes on a current roadway that we could, you know, work with you to select. And then another thing that I didn't touch on too specifically, but is really a big part of this is what we call the 3 E's, which are engineering, education, and enforcement. And so kind of getting into more of the details on all of those and really what would be the recommendation for a future study if we were to do one. And then another thing I added is information on roundabouts, retrofits, and costs. So we actually have 3 roundabouts that are going out to bid right now, any day now. I think one actually might already be out. Yay, I know, very exciting. So we'll definitely have more information at a future meeting on the associated costs for one thing of different types, because we're putting out to bid 2 minis and then a larger one right now. But then later in the year, we'll have some good before after speed data once the construction is done, but that'll probably be later, like towards the end of the year. So those are our proposed next steps. And with that, any questions and comments you have would be great. And this was informational only, so you can discuss whatever you'd like regarding this presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Carly. I really appreciate the detail in the presentation. Councilmember Lawson, I'll defer to you first.
Okay, thank you, Chair Marcano. So I do have a couple questions and maybe a comment. I think, you know, lowering the speed, especially in our local areas, is a good idea. However, I guess I'm wondering about when you're looking at the 2 examples that you presented. I'm not really focusing so much on Denver per se, but maybe Boulder, but maybe Denver too. So when they were talking, or Portland, or where these studies were done, did they look at what are some of the factors that came into play? Like, because I see if we lowered our speed limit, people are still going to go, if we lower it to 20, people are going to go 25. Because people right now are going 30, where even where I live at, it's narrower than the streets that you have right here on Tufts. And we have a speed thing and people are still going 30, 35. And it's a narrower street because we got one going up and people coming north and south, going to Parker Road, going to Smoky Hill. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is how was enforcement put into that? Because you know, those cities might have more officers who are on the streets, kind of, you know, looking at traffic, pulling, you know, how is that implemented into those studies compared to Aurora, I guess? I would want to look at that. But also, if we're saying that it's not going to have too much of an impact and we're going to lower it, um, I'm just trying to see where the benefit of taking 1.6 million. I would agree to a pilot for the beginning to keep kind of see how it works. But I guess if it's not going to make anything change, then what would be the point of the 1.6 million? So I know I put a lot in my question and it was also a comment, but I'm just trying to understand, and maybe with the study, I could probably have a better idea of how this would work. And I'm not against it. I think it would be good to lower it. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what are some of the factors that some of these other cities put into play that really made this work?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Just first, the staff recommendation is not to lower the speed limits. What we've heard from other agencies is that lowering the speed limit doesn't change anything. So it's really a lot of money and time spent for not really a benefit. So this was just meant to be informational and was something we discussed including in a future meeting at the last TAPS meeting. So this wasn't meant to be like a staff recommendation for lowering speed limits. This was just meant to be kind of backup of what our findings were when we reached out to those other agencies and they kind of gave us a debrief. So yeah, sorry if that wasn't clear.
Well, I wasn't on tap, so I'm looking
Yeah,
at
I
this.
know. Yeah.
But you're stating in your comment that you're going to bring this forward. I mean, you have options for a pilot, you have this stuff. So to me, this is looking like it may be something you're going to bring to a study session, and it could be something for a consideration. That's how I'm looking at this from my perspective.
Got it. Yeah, so our goal was really to give higher level information with this
Okay.
presentation, to get feedback from you all, and then to possibly give more information to clarify different parts of this, and maybe to go over some of the, for example, engineering, education, and enforcement. So talking about this with APD on how it relates to enforcement, and maybe talking about some of this in more detail at a future TAPS meeting. But right now, we're not planning to bring anything forward. I'm not sure, you know, maybe a council member would want to bring something forward in the future as far as the resolution, but right now it was really just meant to be the initial information. So.
Okay, my apologies.
Oh, it's okay.
At the last one, I thought this was
It's
something
okay.
that we were considering, because I think it has a lot. If we did do something like this, we would have to really look at this. It's when we're talking about $1.6 million. So
Yeah, it's a big price tag.
yeah,
Agreed.
because that means a lot of street revamping, things like that. You have to look at different, you know, those areas that you presented. I mean, there's narrower streets. So thank you so much for the presentation, though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. And yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of more comments for some more context, Councilmember Lawson, since you're right, we did have this conversation at our last meeting. So, you know, one of our constituents who is regularly testifying at Public Invited to be Heard, she had asked us to look into lowering residential speed limits. And I was familiar with the 20 is Plenty program and actually drafted an ordinance that would have, you know, lowered the limits, but we wanted to have this presentation first. And, you know, staff brought this information to us, demonstrating that it's not the signage that changes any behavior. You know, we had conversations about different kinds of signage last year on council and whether or not would be effective. So, but it's the built environment that really matters. So the conversations that we're going to have, I think beginning in March, or was it April? I forgot exactly what we had talked about.
I think March. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. We're going to involve more about how we can strategically begin to alter the built environment to basically foster those lower limits. And once you actually have an environment that is geared to slow people down, you know, to increase safety for folks in our residential areas, but of course in our commercial areas as well. One of the things that I wanted us to discuss there is the potential benefits for businesses in those areas with lower speed limits, because there's some information that I've seen that actually will increase economic activity when you slow folks down, or better yet, get them out of their cars and get them walking or on bikes. So, that's something that I see huge potential for around like the Havana bid. We could do some of that on Colfax and some of our other, commercial areas in the city. So that's part of the conversation that we're going to be having. But going back to residential streets, as we're going through, and now we have, we took out some debt to basically resurface our roads and keep them at better, condition. I'm still hoping that there's opportunity for us to make some minor changes to the surface use of these roads. We can reconfigure how parking sits. We can add separations, cheap separation, physical separations with like reflector posts and things like that to delineate bike lanes and stuff, things of that nature, to reduce basically the drive aisles, if you will. And that kind of thing makes folks less comfortable speeding. And that's how we're, it's through methods like that that we will be better able to slow folks down in our neighborhoods. And then maybe if we even need to, we can go look at the signage, after we actually have the behavior that we're looking for. So the signage would be kind of more of like a reinforcement, but that, from my perspective, should probably come after we've actually gotten the desired result from modifications to the built environment. Because to your point, that's a whole lot of money for something that doesn't necessarily change behavior. So, all right, hopefully that was helpful. Okay, great, thank you. All right, and thank you again, Carly, for the presentation. And I'm very, very excited to continue this conversation later on in the year.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so our last item on the agenda today, or under general business anyway, is 4C, which is an overview of what we covered last year.
Yes, and thank you, Ellie.
Right, there you go.
Just gonna hang on one second. All right, can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Make you all bigger because you just got really small. Okay, all right, so last year, 2022, we actually had 34 items that we brought to TAPS, so it was a busy year. Kind of kicking it off, we looked at an intergovernmental agreement with RTD for Havana Street transit improvements. That is actually being implemented now, and we have our first bus queue jump improvements here in the city on Havana here very shortly, right, Carly?
Yes, it's actually working now, very recently. So very exciting. Yeah.
Great. Also had the resolution for our improvements through our Dr. Cog tip funding with the IGA for 11th Havana and Del Mar Parkway. That's going to replace a lot of very old traffic signals, do multimodal improvements, and make it just better from the multimodal and the transit perspective out there. We updated the truck route map as required by code. We had a bill to amend an ordinance to amend chapter 126 relating to payment for traffic signals, the escrow. And we did an overview of what we talked about in 2021. So. Also, as you all know, we were approached by Denver regarding the Colfax bus rapid transit last year. So we gave an update on that and kind of recommended next steps. We also had a resolution again for some Dr. Cog funding for a traffic signal system project. And then we also had the IGA between city and CDOT again for some great funding for the Northwest Aurora intersection pedestrian safety enhancements, where we'll be shortening up the pedestrian crossing distances at some of those intersections and providing better protection for the pedestrians. We also had the funding agreement for Parker Quincy Smoky Hill intersection, which is continuing in design to get those improvements out to bid for construction, I think later this year. We also provided you a funding update for many of these IGAs that we talked about. And then Den came and gave us an informational update. Kind of back to the Colfax bus rapid transit, we worked very closely with planning to come up with ideas for station enhancements and locations for those enhancements within Aurora. We had an IGA again between Aurora and CDOT for Dr. Cog tip funding to do a bunch of Aurora missing sidewalks. These missing sidewalk projects have been really successful in terms of getting us dollars so that we can fill in gaps and make better improvements. There was a presentation from Glideways about their network. We talked about roadway maintenance and what it was going to look like for this year. There's an extra 2 in there, but we had the transportation improvement program, what we were going to apply for 2022 to 2027. And we also gave an overview of the Infrastructure Investment and Job Acts overview. Within the TIP project application, I think we've hit 5 that we have now that we were successful getting. So pretty exciting. And then an update on Centennial Airport, and then also an update from you, Chair Marcano, and Councilmember Murillo about your International Making Cities Livable Conference. Carly showed the picture of 13th Avenue, and we gave you an update on the multimodal study that we're doing in there, and we're applying for funding to do finalized design in many of the locations so that we can apply for more funding to implement some construction features in there. Another IGA between Aurora and Denver, and it was about the ownership and maintenance responsibilities for the Peoria Crossing. That's over by 33rd in Peoria. It was constructed years ago, but we finally have nailed down the operations and maintenance. That took a little bit of time because there were some warranty issues that had to be taken care of. Another IGA with CDOT for the Highline Canal East Colfax to I-70 project. This completes the last piece of the Highline Canal for that whole connectivity throughout the city. We gave an update on the council chambers renovation regarding getting improved ADA access within the council chambers and a more comfortable seating arrangement. Mayor Pro Tem Gardner gave us an update on Mexico City's BRT system. Another IGA between us and the City and County of Denver for the Colfax BRT project. Made a lot of progress on that last year, so it's really exciting. There was a briefing from the Colorado Energy Office on the e-bike initiatives that are statewide. Another IGA with for the Aerotropolis I-70 corridor for the Transportation Demand Management Program development and implementation. So we could look at different multimodal options out there. Arapahoe County was successful to get a transit and micromobility study grant. And so this item was the giving us the approval to put a little bit of funding towards that as well. So that is kicking off this year. We updated you all on our SMART grant application that Carly did. We also looked at alternative fuel corridors and how those are nominated for that process. Gave another update on the TIP projects and the IIJA. And we also brought forward a resolution for an advanced traffic controller project to replace the traffic controllers in the city to make them much more functional and agreeable for some of the smarter applications that are out there. We have gone forward and partnered with Adams County on a transportation improvement program application as well. We did an overview of our snow and ice control plan for this year. And finally, an analysis and evaluation of the pilot program and an update for you all on the pilot program for plowing residential streets. I also did want to mention that we've had a request from Councilmember Bergen to talk about plowing on residential streets and also the status of street operations as far as resources and hiring for the February 6th study session. So that was a lot there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you for that refresher, Cindy. We do cover a lot of ground on this committee.
I know.
So I will go ahead and defer to Councilmember Lawson first. Questions,
Thank you.
comments?
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. So you guys have covered a lot. I guess one thing, Councilmember Marcano and members that are on here, the city staff, is there a way that we can get a presentation or just some thoughts around as we're growing, looking at our transportation grid? Now, I know you've had Mexico City, I know you've had some other countries, but we have some realities. And just talking to some people from RTD, I was over at the Capitol yesterday and met someone. They're saying with our growth, and I'm kind of explaining kind of what's happening, we're building, we're doing all of this out on the southeast side of, Aurora, but there's no promise of any type of transit.
Yep.
And what I would like to know is what are maybe some other cities doing? Are they working with developers to say maybe you could chip in, or public private partnerships as we're growing, we're bringing businesses out there. I would kind of like to know more about our growth and how, and I know this could be kind of correlated to PED, but I think with transportation, I think I'm looking at the grid and how we're looking at the future from maybe 5 years to 10 years. And just trying to see maybe is there other cities who have done some other things with knowing that their transit system does not have the available money to fund growth and transit in areas that other cities are growing like we are. So if that, does that make sense?
Yeah, and actually Mac is on the call as well.
I
And
know,
so
and I've
Mac-
talked to Mac about this. I guess I'm just asking, is that a presentation that we can have? Councilmember Marcano, for maybe consideration, to maybe talk about that, and maybe is there some ideas that we can bring forth, or maybe talk to other partners, in jurisdiction. I believe in collaboration, but we need to try to do something, in my opinion, because that's going to be a whole different, it's going to be just traffic.
Yeah.
That's what we're creating. So.
So I'll just quickly respond. I'm in emphatic agreement with you on this issue. This is something that Mac and I have discussed. I know that the Arapahoe County subcommittee for DRCOG has discussed. I think we've discussed it in bits and pieces on this committee as well. And I think you're right. It will tie back to PED to some extent, because part of what we have to do, I think, is revise our city's master plan, basically, and perhaps even the UDO, to require transportation considerations and planning be done as we're approving new development in the city. Because from my perspective, and this is a great frustration that I have, every city in the metro is kind of just doing its own thing when it comes to their own growth. We're not coordinating like we should be, so it causes inefficiencies when we try to catch up. For example, I'll use the Colfax bus rapid transit as an example, right? I'm very excited about that corridor, but that we're not going to be able to continue dedicated bus lanes all the way through Aurora to the terminus of that line because of the way our infrastructure is currently built out. And modifying that would be very expensive at this point, right? So, which kind of segues into something that I wanted to bring up to you and also to this committee, because as you're chair of FISR, and that's discussing Representative Corey Bush's Bus Rapid Transit and Light Rail Transit Acts, which I am very excited to see, because that's some serious federal dollars that would be able to be allocated towards tackling some of these issues and, let's say, incongruencies between various jurisdictions' transportation plans. So I said all that to say, yes, absolutely, I would love to have a presentation on that. I'll defer to staff as to when we can get that on, but I also wanted to bring that Rep Bush's bills to your attention if you weren't already familiar with them, because I think that warrants discussion and potential advocacy from our federal priorities, because this all came up after we stopped meeting last year. So.
Yeah, and Councilmember Marcano, I agree. I think it goes through, the Pfizer committee, this committee, and PED. But I brought this up. I've been on council for a while, and I know that this issue has been something that I've always brought up about our grid and how we're growing and how we're doing transportation. And I know being on Reimagine RTD and just kind of knowing what's happening with the funding piece on that and how we can get money that way, it's going to be difficult to support the amount of growth, and we're building more and more and more. So what do we want to have, like a traffic thing? Can we have park and rides? These are just things that I've brought up, so I just think it's just warranted for a conversation in general in probably all three committees.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely agree. And yeah, to your point about the cost, it's going to be expensive whether we do it now, and it's going to be more expensive if we wait till later. So I think it's something we need to start planning for now. So I'm with you.
And I think, and Mac, jump in here too. We'll be kicking off our multimodal transportation system master plan here shortly. To your point about planning, these are all great items that we've considered and are including in the scope, which is still being refined right now. Mac, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you, Cindy, on that. Appreciate the question, Councilmember Lawson and Chair Marcano. Certainly, land use and transportation are inexorably linked. We know there's a clear linkage in terms of land use and intensity and density of those activities and the varying modal opportunities that will present themselves as we continue to grow. And this is a perfect opportunity, we believe in. We received in one of our TIP awards, the call number 2, actually, back in June, a substantial amount of funding to really conduct a citywide multimodal transportation master plan, covering a lot of elements that the city really needs to tie together: land use, transportation, and different modes: biped, vehicular, freight, transit, micromobility. The county, actually, we're partnering with the county. They're kicking off a county-wide transit and micromobility, which we think will feed us in and deliver value and benefit to our sub-regional service councils that the RTD board had adopted and are taking up and have deployed quite recently as part of Reimagine. Well, actually, as part of the state legislature review, the RTD Accountability Committee. So work that Councilmember Rio served on as one of the co-chairs on that. So we think there are varying opportunities on all this front. I like the idea of also tying in PED, Pfizer from an intergovernmental relations perspective and partnership, as well as from a legislation perspective on that. So appreciate that. And we're getting very close to finalizing the scope and then going through our procurement process for our multimodal transportation master plan. On that will be, I will tell you that will be about approximately a 2-year effort on that. So that's why I mentioned the Arapahoe County Transit and Micromobility Study. That is a 1-year effort, and that actually has a pilot demonstration component to that as well. And then let's talk about how we can partner effectively with RTD moving forward. You have to be an optimist in this business. There won't always be a drastic shortfall in funding, or there'll be additional funding on that. And we're seeing support also at the Denver Regional Council of Governments level for multimodal components in the regional transportation plan that has components throughout our city as well. So appreciate that. Looking forward to having a collaborative effort with this committee and the others that you mentioned in the near future. Definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, Mac. Pardon me. And Councilmember Lawson, do you have any other items that you wanted to add?
Not at this time, Councilmember Marcano. If I do, can I just go through you and just?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Thank you. And we've already got some stuff in the works for March from me. So, all right. Seeing no further conversation on this, we'll move into miscellaneous matters. Councilmember Lawson or staff, do you all have any updates?
I was hoping that I could introduce our new deputy director over our new development review division, if that's okay. All right, great. So I'm really excited to introduce Steve Durian. He's joining us from Jefferson County, and he is our new deputy director over our new development review division. Within Public Works, we are in that process of the reorganization. We're pulling all the development review functions together under one umbrella. And Steve is holding that large umbrella over all of our different disciplines within development review. I'm super excited to have him here. It's the 7th week, I think, and he's jumped in with both feet. Steve, you want to just tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Excuse me. Yes. Thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Council members Lawson and Marcano, for having me here today. A little bit about myself. I've got a background in development review and traffic engineering, so a lot of what you discuss here is kind of close to my heart. I also have a couple years experience with a commercial real estate development company, so I kind of know what both sides of the business are like, the private side and the public side. So I bring a lot of that experience to Aurora. I've overseen, as Cindy mentioned, my most recent experience was at Jefferson County, overseeing a lot of transportation and engineering functions, including being on the DRCOG Technical Advisory Committee along with Mac. And so I know Mac from that experience. But really bringing all that experience here to Aurora is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to working closely with you all. I'm sure I'll be bringing IGAs to you, and you'll see me again here shortly.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Great to virtually meet you. Look forward to meeting you in person.
Absolutely.
Any other miscellaneous matters for the good of the group? All right, seeing none. Anticipated topics for our next meeting.
Matt's got that.
Yeah, we're going to be bringing forward. So right now we are working diligently on DRCOG's call 4. It's 2022, still call 4 as far as DRCOG's concerned for TIP projects. And some of the earlier projects that we were awarded in call 2, we are now getting those IGAs going. So that you'll see the IGAs for the multimodal master plan, the Smith Road improvements, as well as the next round of missing sidewalks. Hoping to have those ready for the next meeting.
And then Carly will also have the update on the next steps for the 20 is plenty, the items at the end, correct?
I think we were thinking March for that. Yep.
Oh, that's right. It's only January, but it feels like February.
It does feel like February already.
Oh my goodness.
It's okay.
Well, it's almost here. Holy
Like, Cindy,
smokes.
that's really fast. Yeah.
God.
No, I had a similar thing happen with the timing of this meeting. I was telling people, oh yeah, we're going to be discussing 20 is plenty in February. And it's like, wait a minute, it's still January.
Oh,
Yeah.
I feel better.
It's a long month.
You're good. It's time. It's time. All right. Great. So with that, can we confirm our next meeting, which I believe is supposed to be on the 23rd at 1 p.m.?
That works for me, Councilmember Marcano.
Great. And staff, just wanted to make sure I gave the right time and date.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that will also work for me. So with that, I will see you all at 1 p.m. on the 23rd, and we are adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.